Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 158th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the value of holding political campaigns legally accountable for the truthfulness of the campaigns and statements set forth in their advertising. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. And on his left is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. And on her left is Joe Gaines, member of the University of Akron faculty. Ron, the United States Congress has passed a series of truth in advertising laws, actually going back to the 1800s. And they're passed to enable consumers to make more informed decisions about the products they buy. Those laws, however, did not apply to political advertising. Don't you think it's at least as important that voters' access to information used to decide which candidate to select for a leadership position be at least as truthful as grocery shopping?
John, it's an interesting question, and the first impulse is to say, oh, well, yes, no, very simple, but I started thinking about it. I think it's considerably more nuanced than that. And I see that it has, tendrils reaching into the whole idea of free speech and First Amendment. So I did some time to do a little bit of reading back on that as how that came about and how it's kind of evolved over the years, and then to try to think about whether or not it applies here. And basically it doesn't. It's applied. Political speech basically prevents the government from stopping it. And the four freedoms of that are freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble peaceably, and freedom to petition the government for redress of grievance. And back in the early days of the founders, there was something called basically the Alien and Sedition Act. And John Adams and some of the others wanted to model this on English common law. But Thomas Jefferson was reelected over Adams, and among other reasons that he was opposed to that. He thought it should have a real broader reach. And so that sort of happened. And coming forward a bit, in about 1927, there was a case of a woman arrested for disseminating communist literature. The communist revolution had happened, and it was...
Well, I'm sorry, what year was that?
1927. And Justice Brandeis said to that, I'm going to read that. Those who won our independence believe that freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think are means indispensable to the discovery and spread of political truth, that without free speech and assembly, discussion would be futile, that with them, discussion affords ordinarily adequate protection against the dissemination of noxious doctrine, that the greatest menace to freedom is an inert people, that should everybody be allowed to vote, is an inert people, that public discussion is a political duty, and that this should be a fundamental principle of the American government. So just based on that, it would appear to me that no, you shouldn't really censor this, truth in advertising. You have to make up your decisions based on your further thinking of facts. Now I'm a liberal, and I think, yeah, we should be free about all these things, but there are obviously restrictions on all this.
But I shouldn't be able to tell somebody a pill is going to do something to cure an illness.
On the other hand, if it's a falsehood, then the person against whom it's perpetrated has a right to sue, and probably does. Now, should an entity, a public, a media, voluntarily censor? Well, I think they have that right to do so. Twitter recently said that they're not going to censor this, they're going to judge it in some way.
They're going to eliminate the political ads.
Going to eliminate the political ads completely. And that's probably wrong, I think. But they have the right to do that. Mm-hmm. Just as a supermarket could not advertise butter.
So far, they haven't been properly sued yet, have they?
No, they haven't. And are they going to, and it doesn't say they're going to try to limit discussion. I mean, they'd have to cut out Mr. Trump for one thing, Mm-hmm. He's pretty inflammatory sometimes, as many others are. I don't follow Twitter, but I see other subsidiary things. Particularly Facebook's the only one I follow, and it's bad enough. I just don't read them. You know.
Yeah.
So I think it's fairly nuanced, and I have a lot more. You know, I've wrote about that, but
But you think that though that the First Amendment protects political speech,
protects political speech
in all shapes and forms,
yeah, pretty much.
in a different way than it protects advertising for consumer
Yes,
products.
I think so. I
Okay,
think
Bryan,
so.
what do you think?
I'm right there with Ron. I really think it's a slippery slope when you start censoring political speech, even though you might think it's fake news or you might think it's wrong or it's laden with falsehoods. I think it's up to the individual. Now, obviously, there are laws in place for defamation and slander and libel, and if a political candidate feels that they've been defamed or slandered or libeled in the news, they have a right to take their case to court and to, you know.
Boy, is it difficult though to
Well,
to
you know,
win a
we're
case
starting
on.
to see some things. You know, the young man that was basically run up the rail over wearing the MAGA hat and standing there in front of the Native American gentleman,
Yeah.
that case is going to go through. The judge has decided that the Washington Post can be sued for $300 million, and they're going to have to go to court and make their case. And I think that's where sometimes these things need to end up. But who's the arbiter of whether that's real or not? Who makes that decision? Is there some star chamber? Is there some panel that says, oh, wait a second, that's not true? I mean, we've got PolitiFact, you've got Snopes, you know, you've got all these, you know, the organizations that go in, and there's even some inherent bias in those. I think it's it's troubling. I kind of find it humorous that, you know, Bernie Sanders and his crew and the young lady from New York, AOC, want to impose their standards on Facebook. They want Facebook to go in and pull all the ads that they feel are incorrect. And obviously, it's no surprise, most of those are ads against them. And I think that's where you're at now in this argument, is that if someone puts an ad up there and it might have a nugget of truth to it, oh, well, you know, you're trying to sway an election and that's not fair and all that kind of stuff. Well, politics is a messy, ugly, and it's been that. I mean, you go back, I looked at some newspapers from when Abraham Lincoln was running. Boy, I'll tell you.
Before that,
Before
Adams,
that, yeah, it was
Adams and Jefferson.
Yeah,
Adams and
yeah.
Jefferson.
You know, they put a lot of
Nasty people.
pretty nasty stuff in print, and,
God,
and
there were ads about Jackson's wife being a prostitute.
But then there's the business of that apparently happened in 2016, where foreign governments, Russia, could come in and anonymously sway that.
Yeah.
So
but
that's another problem.
I think though Facebook was quick to go in and say there was a small percentage of the overall advertising that went out and on their platform that could actually be linked back. I mean, there are you know, there are bots out there. I mean, there are bot farms where basically, you know, these troll bots, there might be one person and he has 300 accounts.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's what they're paid to do.
I heard a story yesterday. Oh, sorry,
Well,
Judge, sorry.
you know, there's going to be a percentage in any media platform of these particular types of issues when it comes to, you know, trying to sway an election.
I was listening to a fellow talking just yesterday on a radio discussion about he spent an afternoon in a guy's living room where the fellow went through and did a process of how he got these things going. He had a crew of a dozen people. He said, well, here's something I'm going to put out there, some falsehood, but something that's wrong, something against such and such a candidate. And he got a group of people together, and they looked it up, and they figured out what would be the good title of this, and went through all this. And in the course of several hours, he put this out. It went viral. And, you know, and he had that mechanism put up that he could make that happen.
Yeah, yeah.
That's there.
Yeah.
But should it be censored?
Patty, let me ask you a question before you begin.
Okay.
Thinking back to the election of 1964, there are a lot of professional pundits that think that election swung on one ad run by the Johnson campaign, showing a little girl picking flowers.
Oh, yes. I
And
remember
then
that,
a hydrogen bomb exploded and This is what's going to happen if you elect Barry Goldwater.
Exactly.
And it was a powerful, powerful ad, and it was false. There was no reason. Barry Goldwater ran on a campaign about Vietnam: either fight the war to win it or get out. That was his pitch, which then the Johnson people translated that into drop an H-bomb on North Vietnam.
The commercial was only shown once, though, wasn't it?
Oh, I can remember seeing it many times. Yeah, but in any event, that had a big impact on an election and a big impact on our history. We went ahead and fought a nameless war for a number of 8 more years after that. But what do you think about that kind of an ad?
That one, I'm not going to say it was nuanced, but it was not. I'm not sure it was an out and out lie. You had to make the jump that if you vote for him, there's going to be a nuclear war. That was actually never said in words in that ad. You know, when I first approached this topic, I, like Ron and Bryan have said, I thought, you know, this is free speech, and you do have the right to say that. And that, as Bryan said, there are concerns about who is going to make the determination that an ad is false. You know, who decides if this is true or is not true, because so many times politicians have the ability to take a situation and to spin it in their own terms to make it look a certain way. The problem is when the ads, however, are blatantly false and really out there, and people believe them and act upon them. During the 2016 election, there was an ad that went out, and it was all over the internet. And it wasn't necessarily an ad, but it was the idea that Hillary Clinton was running a child pornography ring out of this pizza shop.
I remember that.
And it sounds ridiculous. Someone actually went in there.
Actually, it was child trafficking.
Child trafficking.
Yeah.
Went in and took a gun and shot people in that pizza shop based upon this false ad. You know, this is one of the concerns with the Russian bots that are going out there and putting these fake ads out there, that they are pushing ideas and lies, out and out lies.
But if you don't like you don't like Hillary Clinton, you'll believe anything.
But
which is what.
Well, then,
happening.
isn't there? Do we not then have the responsibility to prevent that type of anything to go out there? I mean, we have groups like QAnon that are out there right now, you know, pushing
QAnon.
QAnon, yes.
I'm not familiar.
You have not. If you'll see them at some of the Trump rallies, do you know who I'm talking about, Bryan? And they'll have like a giant Q on their shirt. QAnon feels that the government, all of the government in Washington, is being run by a group of pedophiles that are wishing to, you know, overtake the country and do all of these horrible things. And it's, if you read some of the things that they believe and are pushing, it's really scary.
And if that were run as a political ad in support or against a candidate, how would you feel about it being eliminated, censored?
That's when I start to question, shouldn't that be censored, because it takes the person that's maybe not as stable or not able to handle these things and think, oh my gosh, that's real. And, you know, that to me is frightening. I mean, we already have rules as far as what you can put on a campaign poster, for example. If you're a new candidate, you can't write re-elect Haskins unless you have been
retain. You can't say retain, because if you're a new candidate, you've never been there.
If you were appointed,
who would enforce that?
The elections board, and then it goes to the, I think, the Secretary of State's office.
Isn't that censorship?
But that becomes a fight. That's my point. There are rules in place, but when it comes to these out and out lies,
like re-elect Haskins.
like real.
Well, that's not a
in
lie.
my case, it actually isn't a lie, but yeah. Then it becomes problematic. You know, interestingly enough, I just watched bizarre. I was watching Madam Secretary this past Sunday. I don't know if you watched the show. The whole program was just on this topic.
Really?
And there was, and
Oh,
yes,
sorry, I missed it.
it was very, very interesting. And there was a total fictitious, faked video about her and her husband and something they had said about the South Korean president's wife. And she was trying to say that this shouldn't be allowed because it influences trade. They were trying to do a trade agreement with the South Koreans at the time, and it really hurt that. And by someone being able to place this false ad out there, it influenced people. And then they had to kind of come up from behind to try to deal with the situation. And, you know, we have Facebook that is saying, we're not going to censor anything. So
I just want to quickly point out, in fairness, that there are individuals on the left that get inflamed and do the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of their, you know, Bernie's bro went out and shot up a bunch of Republican congressmen on a softball field because he had internalized Bernie's message that these people from the Republican Party were out killing babies and that they weren't allowed to do that kind of stuff. And Maxine Waters got on TV and said, you got to confront these people and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of speech that I think needs to be bridled a little bit when you start inflaming people. And that guy obviously had mental problems. He decided he was going to go out and he was going to take care of the
I think
problem.
people are always going to be inflamed. The problem is when it is totally fake and
Right.
when it is untrue. And there should be some way that we can prevent fake ads going on the
A
air.
politician wants to inflame to a degree to get people interested
Yes.
in the what's going on. This is an interesting topic. It's scary, and what's scary about it is it also deals locally. I mean, we're looking at it from the standpoint of, like, you know, national elections and so on. But when I ran for office, I made a mistake, and it was me that made the mistake. On one of my brochures, I put down that I had a Bachelor's of Science degree and a Master's. I was working on a Master's. I did not have a Master's. When Cesar Carino saw that, he said, you can't pass these out. You know how much money I lost? But I mean, he was right. I couldn't.
And
because
by
it was
what
wrong.
authority did he?
Well, he was running for office too, and he was like in charge of the Democratic Party.
But
same
was
party.
was there some authority that told you couldn't do? I mean, other than Caesar. Is there-
No, other than it was the right thing to do,
Right.
to get rid of it.
He would have to have been
See,
reported
Yeah.
for that, and then there would have, and there have been
Okay.
cases
people
of
would
that
expect you
happening.
to have
but
a
the
master's
what?
degree when
The
it didn't.
elections, the commission would forbid you from making that statement.
I don't know if they would forbid me.
They could fine him for it.
They
Yeah,
could.
They could, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it was wrong. I mean, we always look
That's
at
what
things.
we're talking about.
Right.
When a politician tells a lie about himself or somebody else, should he be censored? Or should that ad be censored? We're not talking about just saying things that the opponent doesn't like.
Yeah.
We're talking about lying, deliberate lies.
You know, we already have laws on the books that prevent us from putting certain things on television. There's a lot of things you can't say on television.
Well,
You know.
I know that. George Carlin sort of outlined all that.
Yes.
The nine
You know,
things
like
you
with
can't say
cable
on
or
TV.
whatever. So, you know,
I've
the
seen that
fact that
routine.
we can censor that, isn't it possible to censor lies that are particularly inflammatory? from
My fear is that if you put more rules or the laws that are there, they also look for loopholes.
That's true too.
They can find ways of getting around it.
There was a group of employees of Facebook that wrote a letter to Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, either demanding or requesting or suggesting that they, the employees of Facebook, have a right to censor political speech on Facebook. Now, personally, that's a horrible idea because they are all of one party. They're all of one mind. They tend to be, according to Mark Zuckerberg. but you couldn't possibly allow one party to censor the other,
Oh, no.
could you?
It would be done by algorithms, but unfortunately, those have not
Yeah.
had a
Algorithms are
really
written by people.
successful.
I'm no longer on Facebook because it just got so tired of some of the things that people were saying politically about certain candidates, and they were untrue,
Yeah.
and it was just mean-spirited.
It's pretty much, among my Facebook friends, it's pretty balanced. There's hatred enough going on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll hold your feet to the fire on occasion.
I know you do. and
But,
I
you know, what I think who should be held, feet to the fire would be your PACs and the campaigns themselves.
Right.
People are going to have opinions no matter what.
Well, doesn't this business of, is particularly inflammatory, isn't that the clear and present danger argument? And the
Yeah.
Supreme Court has somewhat canceled that. Although there was a case in, what was it, when that happened? It was shortly around Vietnam, and there were states that were, individual states were saying, we're going to censor this. There were some people that were advocating force in various ways, and the decision was this: our decisions have fashioned the principle that the constitutional guarantees of free speech and free press do not allow a state to forbid or proscribe advocacy of the use of force or law violation, except where such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing, and I underline this, imminent lawless action, and is likely to incite or cause such action. So again, coming around to that, if it's a clear and present danger, if it obviously inflammatory, then perhaps there is a right to somehow. But again, that's a government action. That's not really the individual company.
Oh, okay, but that doesn't apply to political campaigns.
It doesn't apply to political campaigns.
Yeah.
It applies to inciting
You know,
riots.
unfortunately, we can't expect, we don't expect our politicians to be honest, which is, to me, scary. I want my politician or person that I'm voting for to be honest and to tell the truth. And sometimes, unfortunately, we think that, oh, if this person says it, then it's got to be the truth because they're the person I believe in.
I
What-
wish I
what-
could disagree
what
with
kind
you,
of-
but you're right.
Yeah.
What kind of action do you think the land of the free and the home of the brave can take to assure, or at least to encourage politicians to tell the truth?
The problem is that the punishment comes way after the crime.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
yeah.
That's a good
You know,
point.
in Joe's case, say he won the election and the person running against him goes through his thing with a fine-tooth comb and then makes the complaint, and 6 months, 8 months later, Joe gets fined $10,000. Or a campaign, you know, I think the Obama campaign was fined $350,000 for a particular ad that they ran, but it didn't. I mean,
It doesn't affect
it doesn't
anything.
affect them. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's so far down the road. There was like,
Who
you know,
fined them?
the FEC did, the Federal Elections Commission. You know, that's who all. You know, when you are running in a federal election, the complaint is brought up, and then it runs through their system, and then finally, you know.
So
it's the
there are mechanisms for censorship.
And it's
Oh,
not.
sure.
It's actually not that uncommon.
But when we
Most of-
publish out that, you know, these are what the candidate said and these are lies, people don't buy it. They don't want to know. They don't really want to know the truth sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I think, you know, I watched part of the hearing yesterday.
Yes, I watched all of it.
Did you?
I only watched part of it.
And I watched.
I listened to the whole thing.
I watched Adam Schiff say he didn't know who the whistleblower was.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody believed that. I mean, I'm trying to imagine he has a staff, and the staff interviewed the guy, and he never asked them who was it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
No,
I
I
mean,
don't either.
then again, I mean, you know, when you that whole hearing, at least the part that I watched, was the biggest demonstration of dishonesty I've seen in a long time.
I sent you the link to the fact check article in the fact check organization.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that'd be on that
Oh,
posting.
I
Facebook,
saw
you know.
on your posting you said something about fact check, but I didn't know you had a link.
Yeah, there's a link there.
Why do you think it was so dishonest?
Pardon me?
Why do you think it was so dishonest?
I just can't imagine Adam Schiff or any politician having a staff
Yeah, I
with
understand that.
vital information, and he didn't ask him what it was. That's just my own
Yeah.
suspicions. I mean,
And
Yeah, what I
there
find kind
were,
of
there were, yeah, that's,
it's a
that
little,
we could spend
yeah.
another 30 minutes on
Yeah,
that topic
it's,
alone.
It's disingenuous of any political candidate to rail against a particular media. And case in point, Bernie Sanders and AOC have sort of teamed up, and they're after Facebook. And you come to find out, I read a nice little article by The Intercept that basically went in and looked at her campaign spending. The lady's already spent close to $900,000 this year on Facebook ads.
And you have Trump that has railed against
And-
every
and
media
exactly.
except
and,
Fox.
And he
So-
probably does, and so that's what I'm saying. That they're all
He'll
doing
probably
it.
be about it.
They just don't like it when they lose. You don't like the media when they lose. You love them when you win. So
well, yeah, depending on if they
Sure.
were on your
Yeah,
side.
if the
but-
media in some ways disagrees with your point of view, they're wrong.
exactly.
I mean, look what he's done with what, New York Times and everything, and
Oh, yeah.
newspapers.
Proud to be an ever-Trumper myself.
in the Washington Post.
The Washington Post.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I would like to see some kind of a mechanism for enforcing truth,
I would agree.
giving politicians more incentive to tell the truth
Right.
than they
I would
currently
agree.
have. Well, thank you very much. We'll solve that some other time.